Well, hello and welcome to the Digital Rabbi podcast with yours truly, Sat Solanki. And great to have you with us if you're tuning in today. And I'm also here with the legendary, the one and only Mitch Hammond, all the way from Sydney. It's a long way.
It is a long way, mate. Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for jumping on. I'm like endlessly confused by time zones, and sometimes, it's a nightmare, isn't it? But Mitch, you're part of the ministry team at C3 SYD, part of the C3 family. I'm also part of, in terms of a church, and but you're also just you're somebody who's got a little bit of a. We were just talking before, weren't we? You've got a little bit of a. I don't know. You're just delving into a lot of different things, and I know one of those things is definitely around the creative communications, also the prophetic, which I think is a really interesting thing for maybe church leaders leaning in today. I think a lot of us are wondering, where does social media fit in the context of everything else, whether that's church or business or other things? And I think we're all on this journey as it's evolving and changing and moving, of trying to figure that out, find our niche, those sorts of things. Mitch, just tell us, right? Because I love your content, right? Your content, go check out at Mitch Hammond, is that right? On Instagram.
That's it, yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuff you put out is just like it's really enjoyable. Like I'm encouraged.
I hope so.
I'm encouraged by it, which I think is just, and it forces me to linger. It's not the sort of content that I just move on. Have you always put out that sort of content, or is this kind of a new thing? Or
Look, it's a good question. I think you're so right. I think it's something that is constantly evolving, and I think for me, personally, it's evolved. I've always, if I look back over the last couple of years, particularly, if even I go through my posts from over the last few years, it's always been there. It's definitely been something I've always wanted to do. I've always felt compelled to do. I love the digital space. I love the creative space. So it's definitely a space I feel comfortable in, a space I feel like I can add value to. And for me, it is a balance between I love the area of serving and ministry and being able to encourage and invest into people. I think just the way my mind works, I like really wrestling with thoughts and figuring things out. And I felt like I've even if I look back in like from high school and early teenage years, like it's something where I can see a thread in hindsight of like something I love to do is just be able to help unpack things for people. And so I think social media for me is such a good avenue where it does lend itself to both those things of it's creative, it's fun, it's digital, but also it's helpful, it's encouraging, it's life-giving. Well, at least it can be, So, but I think to answer your question, in probably the last 12 months, obviously the whole world's gone digital to a whole new level. So it has allowed the opportunity for me to probably lean in a little bit more, as have a lot of people, and really just more hone how I do that. And even more recently in the last probably 3 or 4 months, where Sydney and Australia have gone into a lockdown again, probably I've even lent into it probably more than even in the last year, and been very specific with that kind of content.
I'm with you. And was there like a point, because I know for me, well, on a couple of levels, definitely even just in terms of like church and ministry, like very sort of early on, just as a student, rocking up into church life, not really having a lot of sort of, church context, but just definitely having a point when I realized that, when I show up, it makes a difference. And not just like whether I'm present or not, although that's cool as well, but just like realizing that I can contribute. Like there's something that when I make that effort to reach out, to connect, to invite, it makes a difference. And that was like a game changer for me, because I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I remember probably a couple of years ago having a very similar sort of realization with social media, where I was just using it like everyone else did, a bit of fun and whatever. And then suddenly realizing, wow, when I'm putting out content, this is actually doing something. And every day that I don't put something out, not that I want to live with that sort of pressure, but just realizing, I suppose, the opportunity. Was there a moment like that for you when you got more intentional and deliberate about like, wow, I'm going to really use this?
I think Yeah, look, I think it's interesting. I've always wrestled with it, to be honest, because like if I was to be totally transparent, one of my biggest fears is like just getting sucked into like my own, like, and not having really a sober view of my own thoughts, and actually just thinking, you know what, I think my opinions matter, when really they're just a tiny drop in the ocean. I think that's a good wrestle, because I think that keeps us kind of in that place where we're honest with ourselves, and we're not, it's not getting to our heads and all that kind of stuff. But I think it did get to a point where I was almost forced into the corner, because I was getting good feedback, and I was getting people, and there were some particular people who really encouraged me to do it more and more and more, and to not stop. And
cool.
I think I think that was helpful for me, because it allowed me to just feel like, okay, I'm not just doing this for me, or for for the kudos or whatever, but actually this is landing. And I feel like we've got to be faithful to that. And probably in the last year, probably one of the biggest things for me is naturally I probably in a situation where I could go either way, I will default to I'll just maybe let someone else go. But I've actually I feel like I've changed gears slightly, just to actually back myself.
Yes, come on.
a little more. And I think not that I've never been confident or anything like that. It's not that at all. But I think I've really just I'm actually just going to really own my lane. And that whole thing of just being confident and assured in who I am, what I've got to give, and putting value, on the things that I feel like I can.
That's awesome.
Offer.
Yeah, I think you've really articulated there a tension that a lot of church leaders feel as well. Often as a church leader, you're the primary communicator. You're bringing you're bringing something of value, bringing essentially content. We can call it a preach, but it's long form content in person. Maybe now that's shifted. There is a tension there, isn't it, of not wanting to, we're all a little bit sensitive to that sort of the persona that just puts himself, tries a little bit too hard, wants to be the next thing, and there can be almost a little bit of an aversion to that. So we retract and we pull back in the opposite direction. Do you think that's something that church leaders are doing, and how can we, because I know that's definitely true for me. I didn't want to be perceived as XYZ, but now I've just fully owned it. I'm at the moment I'm probably posting 3-4 times a day on Instagram. I'm just going wild, and I'm owning this space. I'm going to do this. I just bought a ring light. It's not really helping now. You can really see the sunshine smashing me.
I brought a ring light this week.
That's awesome. But
I'm there.
Just making that decision to be I'm going to be in this space. What would you say to church leaders who feel like, I do want to make a difference, because obviously that's why you're doing what you do, but just that slight hesitation of how you're going to be perceived, whether by peers, by the congregation, all of that. What would you say?
Oh, totally. Well, I think if you're feeling that, it's good, it's normal, and I actually wouldn't I get rid of it. I think it's a thorn in the side that's really helpful to keep us honest. Like I said, I do think there's a spectrum of people. I think there's probably people who maybe are a little too eager, maybe. But yeah, look, I do think it comes down to just for me, I just had to go, I'm comfortable with who I am, and not let the fear of perception, rob me of my opportunity to step into, and I think I'm often quite future oriented. I'm thinking, okay, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to be. This is what I want to have done. This is things I want to accomplish. And then year ticks by, and I'm like, well, when's this? When are some of these things gonna? When can I jump into these things? And I realized, well, it's really on me. It's really just up to me to actually just take little steps. And I think we just need to take little steps. I think that's really important.
Wow, so good. Yeah, I love that. And you're right, pandemic, obviously. I mean, we're a bit bored of talking about the pandemic, aren't we? It's the last year, the last 18 months. It's all right, let's find a new thing to talk about. But it's true. This has been such a shift for all of us. Do you think, Mitch, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 31.
Come on. Well, I'm 33, so we're in the same demographic of life.
Yes.
What do you think are some of the challenges? Because I think for us, it's quite easy to pivot into a lot of this stuff. We've obviously grown up in the midst of all of the digital change. What do you see with maybe the generation above, a couple of generations? What are some of the challenges that you can see? And also, I'm really interested from your perspective in working in the context of a large ministry, large church. What are some of the challenges and tensions there, and how do you bring that? How do you navigate? You get what I'm saying. How do you navigate into the future? How do you bring everyone with you? What are some of the things we can do to help?
It is tricky, and I think obviously this is nuanced to different cultures and different parts of the world. I think obviously the digital space, which obviously a lot of what we're talking about, is very global, but I think it can be a bit of a veneer where we think it's so global that the digital world loses its locality, but it doesn't. I think like the Australian people online are still Australian people, and so I think we've got to be aware of our context still and not lose local when we're in a digital space. I think that's really important. But I say that to say, I know in Australia in particular, I think there are. We're in a real season in the church, but also outside of the church. There's a lot of generational change happening. And so I think it's a really important time where we actually have to navigate that carefully. And I think you throw on top of that COVID, you throw on top of that all the digital shifts that are happening. There's a lot of layers to this. And so I think we've got to be really aware of just those different factors generationally, how we can work together. And I think we need to show a lot more grace for the different factors there, So the last thing we want to do in a time of transition, in a time of shifts and lots of stuff happening, is to too quickly assume things. I think we really need to slow down and show grace to the different generations, particularly, but also the different cultures we're in as well.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think is the greatest opportunity right now in social media?
Everyone's there. I don't know how to make it more obvious. I think we need to. Okay, this is what I think. I think a lot of people have got a bad taste in their mouth from social media, and then we've either gone all in or all out. And we've seen that. We've seen a lot of people go all in on social media in the last 6-12 months, but actually we've also seen a lot of people just tap out completely. And it'd be really dangerous for leaders, no matter what sphere you're in, with obviously church leaders, but also any type of leader, if we were to tap out of social media or of the digital realm. I think we need to be careful of it, but I do think we need to really keep our value for it in that space, particularly for the younger generation, and just be aware of the new things coming through. There are, one of the studies that I've read recently is the idea that generations are segregating online into different platforms. And so where probably people our age are probably pretty aware of all the platforms, people are starting to slowly set up camp in different platforms. And so I think just the nuance there is really, we really need to understand that there are generations not all on one platform. They're all on different platforms now. And just I think understanding that everyone is there, they're just in different pockets of it.
Yes, for sure. It's quite overwhelming though, isn't it? Like I find it overwhelming, the amount of platforms. You've got TikTok. You're thinking, oh, should I jump on TikTok? I've got a TikTok account. There's not much happening there, but where do you think, if you were to speak to church leaders right now, coming in with a little bit of understanding, but not like pro in any way? I think you're obviously naturally quite creative, and so there's just a natural thing, and I think big heart in this part of the podcast and just in conversations I've been having is just trying to dilute some of those things down, some of those things that come instinctively. Sometimes it's not very it's not very helpful to people, because it's just like, oh, this is what I do. I'll just do it like this. And I'm really trying to, like, for myself, trying to digest and unpack a little bit more some of the, how do we get focus? Because I think that's if I was to think of one word, it'd be that word overwhelm. You know, you look at everything, so many platforms, so many types of content. Jump on reels, put out carousel posts. Should I be using email more? There's YouTube. It's just like, there's the website, good old fashioned website. What should be on our website? You know, and then you've got in person as well. You've got actual, you know, physical gathering. It's not like that's a small thing on itself. And so all these elements and things to wrestle with, how do we focus on the things that are, you know, where do we choose? Where do we choose to put our focus? Because nobody's got unlimited resource or energy.
Totally. Well, I think probably one of the temptations with digital is we think just because we have the opportunity to reach everybody that we should. You know, so for example, you know, I can put up, or this podcast, you know, you might go onto your analytics of this podcast, you know, in a couple of weeks' time and see, okay, you've got a stack of people in London listening, you know, people in Sydney listening, but then you get a random person in Poland listening, and you get another person in, you know, in Nigeria listening. Who knows? You know, and that's great. But I think sometimes as church leaders, we've seen that and go, oh, okay, like we need to, you know, look at all the possibilities.
We're reaching the world.
But
we're reaching the world. Yeah.
This is so exciting, and I think it actually dilutes, and it's a bit of a temptation where we actually get distracted.
Yes.
By that opportunity, and so I think no matter where, you know, what we're doing, we need to keep focus on, you know, what's our mission? You know, what's our mission? And mission is number one. The means, whether it's digital, physical, this platform, that platform, means has to follow mission. And so coming back to, okay, what is our mission? And it's not what's our mission now because suddenly we have these viewers, is what is our mission, and being really true to that, and then allowing the means to follow out of that. What's the best means to accomplish that?
It's not like the mission should have changed really. But I think this is where it's quite difficult for church leaders, because, you know, the mission is kind of everyone. Kind of.
Yes.
There's a sense of we're supposed to reach everyone. How do we niche down? That's one of the words we were talking about just, and I was sharing a bit about my journey of niching down a little bit. You know, one of the things I think is quite interesting is, and I preached on this recently, just this idea of the church being inclusive. It's both inclusive and exclusive, isn't it? In that we don't try and reach everyone. It's nice if it happens, but you know, can you speak to us about that? Because I think a lot of us feel quite uncomfortable with that idea. And we're just going to reach young men. You know, it just sounds like wrong, doesn't it? But is there something in there? Totally. Like, is that what a niche is? Is it defining it so specifically?
I think it is. It's definitely part of that. I think we have to aim for lack of a better term, we have to aim the gun. You know, like, you know, for you know, like I said, for lack of a better term, but I do think we need to target something.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're just firing pot shots and hoping something lands somewhere. If you don't have a target, like how do you even begin? But I think the way we do that is important. And so, I guess if you take the context we're in. I was thinking about this a little bit earlier today. Actually, is actually you are your niche.
Interesting.
And so sometimes I think we overcomplicate it, right? And so we think, you know, oh, you know, who do I want to reach? But you are, like, you just be you.
Yeah.
And I think if we are specific to us, naturally we're gonna reach the people that we are most qualified to reach.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of the world, is that we're all different, but there are obviously commonalities, and there are people that I will resonate with more than you will resonate with. You know, and I think not trying to over define your niche with third party terms or whatever, but actually just saying, hey, how can I be the truest to myself I can be? how can I be the truest to my own message, my own convictions, my own passions, my own interests, not try to be someone I'm not.
Yes.
I'm not trying to be Sats.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be Brady Shearer. I'm not trying to be, whoever else. I'm trying to be as true to who I am as possible. That's my niche. And then I'm going to attract a group of people that no one else could attract,
right?
Because I'm qualified because of my own experiences to speak to those people. That's
awesome. I love it. I think when you really, I think a big part of content creation is flowing out of who you are, isn't it? And even that comes back to that whole tension of like not wanting to overly, push you, if you like.
Totally.
But I think you're absolutely right. We talked about how my niche was reaching church leaders and creatives. I mean, that's me. I'm a church leader and a creative. Yeah. So it makes sense that I'm going to be most qualified to reach those sort of people as opposed to different thing over there. Pretty interesting. And I think if you translate that into the wider church as well, it's quite an interesting thought, isn't it, about how the leader defines or shapes where the church flows. Do you think that's a thing?
I think it is a thing. I think any ministry comes out of a person, not a. It's not a product. It's not a program. It's a person. Jesus. Take him for example. It was him. He was just him. It was his relationships that he built. And so I think what I will say though is it's not always like who you are is not always just your social like your status in society. Yes. It's not just your gender or your where you live or what your city you're in. Who you are is so much deeper than that. And so who you are for me is what you've experienced. It's your personal values. And so like values is probably a big one, is that you're actually going to resonate with people, who have similar values and who have maybe had similar life experiences. And I know for me, if I take it back to niche, I am most qualified to speak to the people who are going through something that I've been through. And so it's not necessarily that they live in Sydney and they wear baseball caps and they love sailing. Like sure, that could be my niche, but I could have someone who ticks all those boxes and we're nothing alike, and we're not in the same niche at all because we've had totally different walks up until that point. But if there could be someone on the other side of the world or on the other side of my city, but they've experienced the same pain that I've experienced. They've had the same questions that I've had. Then I am again, of course, I can speak into that situation because I can lead them where I've been.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because there's such a connection between our ability to be vulnerable. You really see this in preaching, of course, as well, but on all levels, our ability to connect with the people we're supposed to connect with seems to be really tied to our ability to fully just, open up who we are and be open and honest and share. And those things seem to really resonate with people. Do you think, let me ask you a question about, in terms of where social media fits, in terms of, one of the contrasts I've been looking at is like discipleship versus evangelism. There's been a shift for us, at least in our church, where, Sundays always was that space for kind of new people coming in, experiencing church. And I've just realized, wow, actually online provides a lot of that. People can come to our church and have watched, the last, 8 messages, binge watch them the night before, and well, it'd be a bit hardcore, but maybe one day, they don't need to arrive trying to figure out who we are. They can already arrive with that.
Yes.
Do you think there's because I think typically when you think about like social media for churches, if we were to be really harsh and really generalize, it's like, hey, come on Sunday. That's the go-to. That's the go-to, isn't it? The event promo for the weekend. Yeah. And not that you shouldn't do that necessarily, but what I find really interesting about a lot of your content, Mitch, is that you're very prophetically encouraging. I guess it depends what your goals are, doesn't it? But I think you demonstrate a really specific type of content that I think could work for a lot of churches. Mm-hmm. And what I see in church life, and this is where it's a bit easier as a kind of almost person or a personal brand, is that the link between, if you like, the primary communicator and the social media kind of overflow is like instant.
Yeah.
Where and you can do this in a small church as well, so we have the benefit of that as well in our context. But you know, when you think about the primary communicator, it should be their heart and their words flowing through, you know, into the channels. And I see, obviously, you do that in your page. How do you think churches can navigate that? Because that's like, you know, otherwise we've got some random intern, some random volunteer trying to write this really profound content when someone's praying throughout the week and prophesying and all that stuff. Talk to us about that. How do we create that sort of flow that it's not separate, it's integrated?
Look, totally. I think it's such a good question. And I think I honestly don't know many churches that I could list that have done this well yet. I think they're getting better. I don't think our church has nailed this yet, if I'm honest. I think we're getting there. Like, we're learning, and I think a lot of churches are learning in this season. To be honest, I think it comes down to that senior leader having a revelation and a kind of light bulb moment that this is just as important as my sermon on Sunday.
Yes. Wow.
Until the leader has a genuine, you know what, this really matters. Then it won't matter, or it'll be an afterthought, and it'll continue to be a signpost to what they think really matters, which is their Sunday message. Now, it's never to take away from that. That obviously has huge value, but I think the last thing we want is for it to continue just to be the doormat, you know, or the flyer. You know, I think we need to see. That social media and all forms of media are just as big an opportunity, if not, if I can be so bold to say, if not a greater opportunity than the 1 hour we have on a Sunday. Wow. When you think about the time that people spend at church compared to the time they spend online, like, we would be crazy to pass up that opportunity and not use it to our fullest advantage. Yeah. Now, if I can just kind of dive into that a little bit deeper, because I think it's really important. The trickiest part is that Sunday has walls, and we have a lot more control over the type of content we can share in that space. And again, it comes down to the type of church you are, whether you're more missional, whether you're more attractional, whether you're designing that service for the uninitiated or for people who have been there and totally understand what you're about. Digital is different. Like you said, the difference between evangelism and discipleship online, this is where the rubber hits the road, because I think in an online space, it's so public. Well, particularly on certain platforms, it is obviously. And so I think we just need to be more nuanced and not just throw everything from Sunday online. We have to come at it with its own strategy. It can't just be a dump of things of regurgitated stuff. It has to be. I think we need to give just as much resource, time, and attention to that space as its own service, rather than just I mean, obviously, you know, we've all got limitations with resources. So I think if there's things that work for both, great. But I think let's not treat it as the aftermath or just the copy and paste kind of thing from Sunday. Let's get really intentional with it. And I think, you know, I often use the example. I went to Iceland a couple of years ago. Have you been to Iceland?
Yeah, but it's funny. I don't know if you have Iceland as a shop in Australia, but it's also a shop. It's a frozen shop. So I was just thinking, I've been to Iceland, but not the one you're talking about. But yeah, back into your deep thought.
A couple of years ago, I went to Iceland with my wife's family, and if you know anything about Iceland, obviously one of the big things is you swim in the thermal pools, the kind of the blue pools, right? They're off the volcanic rock, and they're hot and they're beautiful. What they don't tell you on the brochure is that before you swim in these pools, you have to go into a communal shower.
Wow.
Gender separated. And you have to shower completely naked before you get in that pool. And so I'm on this family road trip with my obviously my wife, my sister-in-law, and my father and mother-in-law. And so the mum and the daughters went into the women. They were fine, obviously. So then me and my father-in-law, who's an amazing man, but we've just never had an experience like that before. And nor did we either probably feel comfortable about having it to begin with. So we went into the shower, probably 50 other men in there, and it was just awful. It was just such and some people, I don't know, some people are fine with that. I'm not. That person. But I say all that to say this: if you're deciding to swim, if you're trying to figure out what pool you want to swim in, just make sure you understand what's going to be exposed. Because I think sometimes we want to swim in the pool of social media, but we don't think fully through what it's exposing, and maybe we're not comfortable, or maybe we shouldn't be exposing everything that we should in a different context.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If that
one of the
sense.
scriptures that's really helped me, I think, Pastor Josh Kelsey, I've heard him speak on it. It's we're to be as cunning as serpents and as innocent as doves, and it's just the strangest scripture. Like, imagine being compared to a snake as the way we should. But that's Jesus. It's straight from his mouth, and I think what you're saying there is so true. There's some we're gonna be clever, and we're gonna be wise, and we're gonna be nuanced, and
totally.
I think it's a journey. I think sometimes you only find where the line is once you go right up to the line. And the best content is right close, just right up to the line, as far as you can go. Without leaning into kind of just, controversy for controversy's sake, or, just content that's a bit aggressive or whatever. But I think there is some challenge there that people are really looking for. I don't think people are just looking for encouragement and just kind of, they do want to be challenged and provoked in their thinking. And I think, wow, I mean, I just, when you think about the breadth and the talent and the gifting that is on the earth right now in terms of ministry, if we could encapsulate what's happening in so many spaces already and bring that to the forefront of the digital space and the metaverse as well, just for good measure, and throw all of this in there and just, overwhelm all of that terrible, dreadful content that is just mindless, that is keeping people just...
Totally.
I think, wow, that excites me, Mitch. That really excites me.
It does, and I think, I don't think it'll take much, to be honest. I think a little bit more insight, wisdom, training of how to do this well, how to navigate it well. This isn't this isn't new. It's just we need to upskill. And I think I saw you post something today about we can't just expect things to go well. We actually need to work hard and hone the skill, learn. And I think, honestly, the biggest encouragement, particularly for those maybe older generations, or even, honestly, millennials who are maybe a bit over it all as well, is to really just put value on it again, and enough time to actually invest, and not just to put it as one of your team do this, but that you really get your hands dirty in this space.
That's awesome, Mitch. I love it. Gosh, well, Mitch, thanks so much for being on. This has been, I think, rich, helpful. I think this is going to help a lot of people. And so thanks for taking the time, being a part of it. Mitch, you do have a podcast. I don't know if there's more coming out on there, but tell us a bit about that.
I do have a podcast. It's called Made for Monday. I've released one season. We're currently on a little post-season break. More to come in the future, absolutely.
That's awesome.
But you can find it. It's on Spotify, Apple.
So good. And where can people find you if they want to see your content, connect?
Instagram would be the main place, at Mitch Hammond, and love to hang out there with anyone who wants to.
Awesome, Mitch. Thanks so much for coming on today. Hey, thanks for joining us today for the Digital Rabbi podcast. Hope you've enjoyed this, found this helpful. Please do subscribe, rate, review, all of that jazz, and you can connect with me on Instagram at Sat Solanki. Do go check out Mitch as well, at Mitch Hammond, I believe, and stay tuned for some awesome content coming your way in future weeks. Have a great day.